Alright, peace to you, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? Now, in today's video, I'm going to be doing a complete refutation of gravity, a complete deconstruction of the doctrine of gravity as taught by heliocentrists of various theories, because what these people say, what they have said over the course of history regarding this mythical doctrine is incredibly inconsistent, whether you go from them, and they'll jump between inconsistent theories all the time, which we'll get into, but they don't have a consistent explanation. It's just essentially, if you're going to say that the Earth is a globe, if it's a spinning globe and it's going around the sun, the great foil that has existed for heliocentrists since the beginning was, how do we keep people on the edge of this spinning globe? And the proposition they put forward is gravity. And as it has always been and always will be, it is nothing but metaphysical nonsense. And we're going to go through all that. All of this stuff is dealt with in my book. I'm basically just going to be reading out of the Flat Earth Manifesto. You can get all of this stuff. It's in there. But I'll just kind of be expanding on those points. So we'll begin this refutation with a prayer, of course. In the name of God, the Almighty and the Merciful, praise and glory goes to God. And right now, Lord Almighty God, I am endeavoring to deconstruct this pernicious and mythical doctrine of gravity, God. People use this. They use this to try to justify their anti-Lord, anti-God, anti-creation, atheistic, happenstance, chance-based nonsense model of the universe that has been foisted upon us, that they have just propagandized us with to no end. They justify this, my Lord, through their doctrine of gravity. They teach this ridiculous idea that we're on the end, or we're on the edge of a spinning ball. God, I just ask that you allow me to properly and thoroughly and logically and consistently deconstruct this ridiculous doctrine known as gravity, and preach the truth that we all know, that your earth is flat and stationary according to the scriptures, just as the Bible and the Quran say. Allow me to prove that point by deconstructing the glue which holds their entire atheistic nonsense model together. All praise goes to glorious God, and I start this presentation in your name. May you watch over me at this time. Amen. Okay. So now that that's done, the first thing you need to remember is that if gravity is refuted, if I can prove up in this presentation that they have not given a consistent demonstration and explanation for this doctrine, the globe is refuted. Okay, if gravity is refuted, the globe is refuted. All you're left with is a flat and stationary Earth. Because, without gravity, again, how do you have people standing on the edge of this ball that's spinning and whirling through space at multiple different speeds at multiple different times? How do you make that happen? You can only make that happen with gravity, and if gravity is refuted, so does the idea that the Earth is a globe. That's all gone. Gravity is intimately tied to the globular nature of the Earth, because they need to somehow keep us on the edge of the spinning ball. So we're going to do just that. We're going to deconstruct gravity. And another thing you need to know before we go into this is gravity is a religion. It is a religion. There's nothing physical or demonstrable, or at least things going down. Okay, no problem. Obviously, I believe in that. If I take my ring off and I drop it, it's going to go downwards. That's no problem. What I'm talking about is this, depending on, if we go with the Newtonian understanding of it, force or line of precession, if we're going to go with Einstein, whatever, this concept of things being drawn inwards to this globe, that form of gravity, things being drawn to the center of this mass body known as the Earth. That's what we're going to be refuting today. Not things going down, but things being drawn to the center of this globe, because obviously things go down. There's no problem with that whatsoever. I'm talking about this centerward tendency that they like to promote. So, and it's a religion. It's a religion because, if I'm going to go through the whole history from Newton to Einstein, it's nothing but metaphysical abstraction and speculation. There's no empirical evidence behind this at all. At all. It's been metaphysics and religion from the beginning. It's ancient philosophy. So you're going to be treated real well right now with this presentation. So let's go into it. Flat Earth Manifesto. So basically what I'm reading out of is a section of my book called, if I remember it correctly, Newton, Galileo, Einstein, and the Concept of Gravity. And I just it's over 100 pages. I go from the development of Newtonian to Einsteinian gravity, and most of my chapters, especially the ones that are fairly detailed and complex like this, I have a section in the bottom where I summarize all the points that were made concisely so you can go and use them in your debates or in your discussions with people. So I'll just be going over those very points. So arguments against gravity, this centerward seeking tendency. So number one, gravity requires multiple contradictory forces to be working at the same time. Planetary bodies would be simultaneously pulling objects towards it, like people, while also swinging and pushing objects around it, like other planetary bodies. So let's take a look at the heliocentric model. Heliocentric, and really there is no heliocentric model. It's just empty mathematics. Nobody can actually model this stuff in the real world because the distances between the Earth and the so-called planets is too vast. They've just story told and story told and story told how far the stars are, how far Neptune is, how far Jupiter is, how big. And there's no way you can actually model this in physical reality. So when I say heliocentric model, really I'm being too sparing in giving to them. They have no model at all. They just have mathematical descriptions. That's it. But let's see. Let me go to solar system. Find one where the Earth is a little more emphasized. Okay, this should be good. Whatever. So if you take a look at this image right here, right now there's multiple contradictory. Let me actually pull up as well. Moon orbiting Earth. Okay, so right now there's multiple contradictory forces going on at once. So right now, according to their theory, the Earth, this mystical gravity, it's pulling people to the center of this ball. So we have people. This is Africa. We have people living here, and the people or whatever thing, planes and just any object on the Earth is being called to the center of this globe, and they're on the outside of it. Yet at the same time, what we have with the moon is this sort of swinging and pulling motion. It's orbiting around it. It's not flying towards the Earth. It's not being crushed towards the Earth in the same way everything else is. It's kind of being swinged and pushed around. So that's just ridiculous. You have multiple arbitrary forces going together. It's on the one hand pulling inwards, and on the other hand swinging and orbiting and going around it. So it's just baseless theories. And as well, speaking of the moon, their hypothesis that the so-called tides, that high tide is, I deal with this in detail in my book. Their idea that high tide is caused by the movements of the moon and the gravity of the moon affecting the water on the Earth. This is another completely arbitrary and baseless theory, because if the moon passing the meridian, if the moon getting close to us was the reason for the tides, the reason for the waters of the Earth being pulled upwards, why do I not feel so much as a hair on my head be moved towards that same moon? I can't jump up a single inch. I can't throw anything higher than I normally can. I don't feel anything. There's no pull. We don't see the leaves on the trees be kind of drawn upwards or anything move upwards. This gravity of the moon, supposedly it's so powerful it's able to pull trillions and trillions and trillions of gallons of water upwards towards it, yet it doesn't affect life on Earth in any way whatsoever. Baseless storytelling. And you can look, I have this, I'm not going to go over it right now, but it's documented all throughout my book that there have been people who have recorded numerous contradictory observations to this idea that the moon causes our tide. Like high tide happening 11:12, just hours and hours after the moon passes the meridian, proving that the high tide is not caused by the movements of the moon. And we already know that anyways, because if it was able to pull upwards trillions of gallons of water, it would very easily be able to pull us upwards, but we intuit no such effect at all. So it's nonsense. See, we feel nothing of this pull that supposedly is powerful enough to influence the Earth's oceans. Yeah, and another point is, and I brought this up in my debate with Fight the Flat Earth, let me pull up Earth orbit around Sun. Look at this. So again, if planetary bodies, if gravity from planetary or just any space object affects the tides on our Earth like the moon, I mean, according to their theory, the Earth is not at the same distance from the sun throughout its entire journey. So this 365 days where it orbits around the sun, it's not at the same distance from the sun. There's the parhelion and ephelion. I forget which one is which. Let me quickly look that up. Parhelion, ephelion. I get them confused. But the concept still stands. Sun in January, perihelion. Okay, yeah. So yeah, so perihelion is referring to the Earth being close to the sun. So this point right here, this is summertime for the south. It's parhelion. This is when the Earth is closest to the sun. And then ephelion is when it's furthest away. This is winter for the north. Well, if planetary bodies or large bodies in space are able to affect the tides with their gravity, I mean, during this time, the parhelion, when we're closest to the sun, according to their theory, I mean, it should just be high tide all the time. There should be no low tide at all because we're so much more closer to the sun at this point of the year than at the other point in the year. So the sun's gravity should be greatly affecting the tides and, in fact, everything else on the Earth. But again, we don't intuit anything like that whatsoever. When it is when this is going on, when it's a southern summer, there's no high tide all summer long or anything like that. It's just their stories don't add up to physical reality. I mean, how much closer are we to the sun during the parhelion? Let's look at that. How closer to the sun during parhelion? Yeah, so this is by the order of like tens of thousands of miles, hundreds of just insane amounts of distances. We're so much closer to the sun at this time than we are at this time, but we don't intuit any effect on the tides or anything at all. So their tidal gravity theory is debunked just by that alone. Yeah, the theory cherry picks all of its evidence, and there's a pile of historical documentation showing that tides do not occur as a Newtonian lunar supposition would suggest. Point number 2 against gravity is that gravity is dependent on the concept of space, and space is a reification fallacy. And we're going to go over that, but let's just read this right now. In the Einsteinian theory, so in the Einsteinian theory of gravity, which is the bending of space-time, it's a complete reification fallacy. I brought this up in my debate with Fight the Flat Earth, and he was just lying. You could tell he was getting frustrated and angry when I brought that up, and his only argument was just to say the point louder and louder with increasing levels of frustration. He didn't actually deal with my point. He's like, "No, Walid," and he was speaking to me like a bitchy female teacher. He's like, "No, Walid, it's not a reification fallacy. You're not going to do that. It's not a reification." Yeah, it is. Let's go over the definition of what reification is. Reification fallacy. Okay, there we go. So, logicallyfallacious.com. Description. So this reification fallacy. When an abstract belief, or hypothetical construct is treated as if it were a concrete, real event or physical entity. When an idea is treated as if it had real existence. So you're taking an abstract concept, something which is purely conceptual, it's in the mind, and you're treating it as if it has a concrete basis. That is a reification fallacy. It is essentially just false concreteness applied to ideas. And the example they give is Dr. Simmons, I am working on a way to lengthen the human lifespan to about 200 years. Misty, you are declaring war on Mother Nature. Mother Nature always wins. So this is the treating this abstraction of Mother Nature as a real thing. How does this apply to the globe Earth? How does this apply to the concept of gravity? I mean, the Einsteinian general relativity theory is that mass bends space and time. What is space? Space is simply in their theory, it's the absence of anything. It is pure potential. There is nothing there. It is emptiness, nothingness, and they're ascribing emptiness, nothingness. There's no subject there to be dealt with in the first place. They're ascribing the subjectless subject the predicate of being bent. That's a reification fallacy. You're treating a purely abstract concept of empty space or what space is like with no objects in it, and you're saying that it can be bent by mass. That's just, you're applying false concreteness to an abstraction. And the same thing goes with time, time. Space and time is bent. Space-time continuum, the fabric of space-time. Time is bent? What does that even mean? All time is just a measurement of change. It's a measurement of span. That's it. All space is a measurement of location, or rather, I should say, a measurement of distance. That's it. It's a concept. It is a pragmatic operation, and you're trying to treat these things as if they're physical objects, which can somehow be interacted with mass. So it's a reification fallacy. It definitely falls under that definition because, again, we just read, when an abstraction, abstract belief, or hypothetical construct is treated as if it were a concrete, real event or physical entity. And that's what they're doing with their concept of space-time and space being bent in Einsteinian general relativity. You are speaking positively of something which is pure privation. All space is pure depravity, pure privation. There's nothing there. They're taking pure privation and ascribing qualities to it, which doesn't make any sense. Point number 3. Gravity and the supposed laws of motion have never been demonstrated in a laboratory. Newton, his whole laws, the whole system he's developed with his laws of motion, of that items in pure space, which is again an abstract concept, it doesn't exist. Items and objects in pure space will keep traveling in a straight line unless hindered or touched by another object. They will continue going forward in a straight motion. This is, nobody's ever seen this. This has never been demonstrated in a lab. It's a theory. It's just a concept in your mind of how things would travel in this theoretical land of outer space. So his laws of motion, of things traveling perfectly rectilinearly in space, have never been demonstrated in a laboratory. Nobody can make things orbit other things or make water, light, or any other object curve around the surface of a ball. So all these forces that they need for their model, orbiting and things being sucked to the center, and water, trillions of gallons of water being morphed around the circumference of a ball. None of this stuff has been demonstrated in a laboratory at all. We can't make things orbit. We can't do anything. It's just a theoretical construct. It's just stories. It's the abductive storytelling. Number 4, Newton. This is a big one. Newton had no idea what space was. His laws of motion and understanding of space were taken from the occult world because he had no idea what it was. So the Newtonian theory of gravity is admittedly religious, theological metaphysics. So we're going to go through that right now. Straight from the horse's mouth. So let's exit all this. So page 281 of the manifesto. And I do apologize, by the way, the new edition of the Flat Earth Manifesto, I have to publish yet another one because I don't think my page markers are correct. I think some of them are a little off, so I have to go through all of that with a fine-tooth comb and make sure the page markers are correct, but not a big deal. It's not a major issue. So let's see, 281. Okay. So what you need to understand about Newton's system, so Newton believed gravity was a force. It was a force that pulled things to the center of objects of mass, and he had no idea how to explain this. He had no understanding of what this was, but he needed it nonetheless for his globular model that he was trying to promote, his heliocentric model. When things are being sucked, okay, what you need to understand is that gravity, okay, Newton somehow had to solve this problem. So the problem was he believes in gravity, he believes in the center-seeking force, and the two theories of explaining any physical phenomenon, which is particle mechanics and continuum mechanics, particle mechanics being the idea that everything consists of particles, units, corpuscles, bullets traveling through empty space, and continuum mechanics, which is that there is no empty space, that we live in a fully potentialized plenum, that everything is essentially waves and frequencies and vibrations and transference of energy. There's no particles traveling through empty space. And These are really the only two theories I know of, and any scientist has really ever known of, explaining the world: continuum mechanics or particle mechanics. And both of these present problems for gravity because, I mean, gravity can't be a particle in Newton's theory because it doesn't make sense. What is the Earth, or let's say the sun, is it shooting out some particle which is grabbing the Earth and pulling it towards it? No, that doesn't make any sense. How could it be a particle? It's not like it's shooting bullets out, which is like an arm pulling things towards it. And it can't be a continuum either, because if they want to make gravity wave-based or energy-based, like it's some continuum-based mechanics, I mean, then there goes Newton's laws of motion, because Newton's laws of motion, again, they were based on the idea that in empty space, because there's nothing hindering an object from moving, it's going to travel in a perpetually straight line until acted upon by another object. So in space, things travel in a straight line. That was Newton's laws of motion. So he needs space. He can't have a continuum. If he has a continuum, if space is fully filled, then no more laws of motion, no more things traveling in straight lines perpetually until hindered by another object, because they're always hindered by another object because it's a continuum. So now he's locked into space. He's locked into particle mechanics, but particle mechanics can't explain gravity because what? Particles just going and pulling the gravity particles from the sun, pulling the Earth towards it. How does he solve this problem? He needs space to both be a medium which his gravity can travel through, the energy of his gravity can travel through, but at the same time purely empty to keep up his laws of motion. How does he do this? He, of course, makes it into metaphysics. Christian theology is what he uses. And really, he believed in pantheism, that we're all inside of God. So what Newton's system boiled down to was essentially that space is the omnipresence of God the Father. So we are all inside of God the Father. We're moving through him. God the Father is space. And we're going to read this directly from his Principia, his masterpiece work defining the heliocentric model that he proposed in his laws of motion. So actually, let's go first here. So what's it called? The standard definition for pantheism, which is the idea basically that we're all inside of God. God is not separate from his universe, which is, or the world that he created, which is what we believe. It's what the Quran teaches, what the Bible teaches. But instead, the idea that the universe is God and God is the universe and we're moving through God. That's pantheism. We're inside of God. We are God in some way. And standard definition given by plato.stanford.education, standard academic resource. You can check it out. Accredited and famed for philosophy. This is the definition they give for pantheism, and we're going to see Newton's system definitely fulfills that definition. So let's see. Where were we? Oh, I lost my page. Let me duplicate. .281. Okay, so on plato.stanford.education, we read, at its most general, the definition of pantheism, at its most general, pantheism may be understood positively as the view that God is identical with the cosmos, the view that there exists nothing which is outside of God. So pantheism is believing nothing exists outside of God. This is a theological system, so everything is inside of God, or else negatively as a rejection of anything that views God, any view that considers God as distinct from the universe. So we are inside of God, and God is not distinct from the universe. This is pantheism, and that's not science. No atheist would, he is a pantheist. These atheists are pantheists, but they would hate to be labeled that. They would rather be lit on fire than be labeled a pantheist, because then it exposes the theological and religious nature of their worldview. So let's get into Newton and see how scientific and empirical his gravity really was, after just exploring this definition here of pantheism. In his Principia, and let me quickly just show you, Newton Principia. So this book right here, shortened as the Principia or Principia Mathematica, this is his seminal work defining the heliocentric model, defining the laws of motion, which just pretty much all of modern science and astronomy and physics is based on this. So we're going to go right to the most accredited source that we can possibly go to, Newton himself. Let's see. So Principia in Book 3, it says this: God is one and the same God, always and everywhere. He is omnipresent, not virtually only, but also substantially. Let's repeat that again. He is omnipresent, not virtually only, but also substantially. So God is in all places at all times. For virtue cannot subsist without a substance. In him are all things contained and moved, yet neither affects the other. God suffers nothing from the motion of bodies. Bodies find no resistance from the omnipresence of God. It is allowed by all that the supreme God exists necessarily, and by the same necessity he exists always and everywhere. What did we just read about pantheism? This theological system, not empirical quote-unquote science, theology, philosophy. It is the rejection of any view that God is distinct from the universe. And in Newton's view, God, all things are contained in God. He is not distinct from his universe. This is a pantheistic system. We'll give you more. In his Principia again, system of the world. As the parts of the earth mutually attract one another, so do all the planets. Actually, we'll skip over this point. Let's go to Principia, Book 1, Section 11, Scholium. These propositions naturally lead us to the analogy that there is between centripetal and central bodies, centripetal forces and central bodies, to which those forces use to be directed. For it is reasonable to suppose that forces which are directed to the bodies, So this is him talking about gravity. So again, you need to understand I want to say physics, but it's not physics. You need to understand the theology behind this in order to really get what I'm saying. Newton is stuck with a problem. He has empty outer space. He needs empty outer space for his laws of motion, of things to travel in a straight line because they're not hindered by anything else. But at the same time, this space-based, particle mechanics-based reality can't explain gravity because gravity is not a particle that's pulling things towards it. That's just irrational nonsense. So he needs to somehow have space to be a medium which gravity can propagate through, and also as well allow things to travel through unhindered, so he can also have his laws of motion. He's stuck with two contradictory theories. His laws of motion need outer space, and his gravity needs some kind of continuum mechanics-based proposition. And he solves this by saying space is the metaphysical omnipresence of God the Father. God the Father exists everywhere at all times, and he even just said, we just read right there, that bodies are not hindered by him. And at the same time, gravity can also be justified here. Gravity is working through this medium of God the Father. And we'll look at this. He says, regarding this so-called force of gravity, as tending mutually to or agitating each other by spirits emitted spirits, or whether it arises from... Okay, actually, let me go back a little, so people are going to say I'm quote mining. I here use the word attraction in general. So we're talking about gravity, attraction, for any endeavor of what kind soever, made by bodies to approach to each other, gravity, whether that endeavor arise from the action of the bodies themselves, as tending mutually to or agitating each other by spirits emitted, spirits, metaphysics traveling through God the Father, or whether it arises from the action of the ether or of the air, of any medium whatsoever, whether corporeal or incorporeal. Let me redefine that. Whether corporeal or whether physical or metaphysical, anyhow impelling bodies placed therein towards each other. In the same general sense, I use the word impulse, not defining in this treatise the species or the physical qualities of forces. So his gravity is a metaphysical attraction which travels through the omnipresent God the Father. He's openly admitting this here, tacitly, kind of, but also openly too. He's entertaining the idea of incorporeal forces regarding gravity. This is metaphysics, not empirical science as the atheist wants to believe. Principia Mathematica, Book 3. But hitherto I have not been able to, this is Newton admitting this, I have not been able to discover the cause of those properties of gravity from phenomenon, and I frame no hypothesis. So he doesn't know what's the cause of this gravity. It is to be called an hypothesis, blah, 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 blah. And hypotheses, whether metaphysical or physical, whether of occult or mechanical, have no place in experimental philosophy. So Newton doesn't know what gravity is, so what does he do to buttress this lack of knowledge? What does he posit as his abductive reasoning to explain this gap in knowledge? He uses theological metaphysics, pantheism. and how we might add something concerning a certain most subtle spirit which pervades and lies hid in all gross bodies, namely by the vibration of spirits. So this is sufficient to demonstrate what Newton believes. He believed in the omnipresence of God the Father, that was space, and this was the medium in which gravity traveled through. And I'm not going to go through that as well, but Newton even admits to posit gravity traveling through something without a medium is baseless nonsense. Newton admitted this to a letter that he wrote to one of his colleagues, but I digress. So where did we leave off? Yeah, to him it was the omnipresence of God, or the universal spirit whom we all move through. And where did Newton get this from? He got this from alchemy and Neoplatonism and Platonic philosophy. That's where he got this. Let's go to my little reference sheet. Yeah, space is God the Father. He uses metaphysics to explain the concept of space and gravity at the same time. Next point. Newton said himself that to posit gravity without giving it a mechanism is foolish and baseless. That is exactly what modern science does, because they cannot explain how their gravity propagates. Newton's own mechanism for gravity was pantheism. It's kind of an elaboration on the point before. Point number 6 is, the fact that there are different planetary bodies, each with their own gravitational pull, is arbitrary in the Newtonian worldview. So let's go to the heliocentric model again. Solar system. So gravity is this inward seeking force, right, of objects of great mass. So my question to the heliocentrists is, it seems arbitrary to me, how did Saturn decide, okay, hey guys, I'm going to be doing some attracting over here, and Jupiter say, hey guys, I'm going to be doing some attraction over here, and Earth say, I'm going to be doing some attraction over here, and here, and here, and they all have these central points of attraction. How does that work? I mean, what it seems arbitrary that you have one point source of attraction here, one point source of attraction there. If gravity causes things to be sucked towards the center of this mass, and it grows the mass as time goes on, I mean, what caused that attraction from the beginning when there was no mass there to begin with? There was no, we just assumed the Earth, but what about when the Earth was forming and things were being sucked towards it, and over billions and trillions of years, all this abductive storytelling they tell you? How does that work? Why did Earth decide, I'm going to be a point source of attraction over here, and Jupiter say, I'm going to be a point source of attraction over here? Why didn't it all just clump together at once? It's just ad hoc. It's nonsense. Yeah. How did Jupiter decide that it's going to be the epicenter of gravitation, and Saturn decide that it's going to be another epicenter of gravitation elsewhere, if all matter has inherent gravitation? If the gravity of a planet is the sum total of all of its constituent parts, so the gravity is inherently tied to its mass, all the constituent parts which bring the planet together, then what stopped everything from clumping together after the Big Bang? What made all of these different epicenters of attraction? What caused their individuation? And of course, they have no explanation for this. It's just another whole flaw in their theory. Point number 7 against gravity is atomism in quantum mechanics, which is the foundation of modern physics. They believe this idea that everything is particles traveling through space is an ancient concept that has been refuted thousands of years ago by Aristotle in his physics and by Zeno's paradoxes. You would not be able to hear anything. So this whole idea of particle mechanics, they try to make it seem like they're at the cutting edge of science. They've developed all these incredible, elaborate theories that explain our world, and we're so advanced in our knowledge. I'm not going to go over it now, but all atomism is, it's just ancient metaphysics from the past. They're not moving, as they like to claim, they like to boast of progress. They are not moving one syllable away from the ancient world. All the stuff is ancient metaphysics revived. And you can even go to guys like Democritus. Yep. Primarily, remember today, this is according to standard history, 470 BC to 370 BC. This is the ancient world, okay? This is antiquity. Primarily remember today for his formulation of an atomic theory of the universe. So this goes back very, very far. This idea that reality is composed of infinitesimal small units that travel through space. This is an ancient metaphysics that goes far back. This is not an advanced theory that they just came across now through scientific observation. No, this has existed for a long time, and it was built through abstraction, through mental masturbation of philosophers. These people are doing philosophy, they're not doing science. And the proof right there is, see this ancient philosopher proposing the same theories, this idea of atoms. So, continuing on, I'm not going to go over to the arguments that refute atomism. It's already in my book in detail, but I just want you to understand that this is an ancient metaphysical system. It's not modern, cutting-edge science. So, we'll skip over point 8. Not really important. It's a minor point, but I'm not interested in going over that right now. This one is big. Okay, we got to go over this. The universal rate of free fall is a hoax. This is a big one. So, the theory in their system is that, okay, so remember, they believe in the Newtonian laws of motion. What is one of these laws of motion? The law of motion is that items will travel continually and perpetually in a straight line. Items will travel continually and perpetually in a straight line in outer space when not hindered by any object, okay? So it doesn't matter whether it's me floating in space or the CN Tower or this ring. There's no weight in space. Things just keep going. Just keep floating, keep floating, keep floating at a constant speed. That is the spatial theory. And with this theory, they've derived this idea of a universal rate of free fall. So theoretically speaking, in a vacuum, when there's no continuum, there's no atmosphere, in a vacuum in their system, let's say something started to approach the Earth. The Earth has a gravitational pull, it has gravitational attraction. There's no weight. There's no... how do I explain this metaphysical jargon to you so that somebody who doesn't have a background in this stuff understands? There's no continuum or gradient of pressure. So let's say there was just a vacuum around the Earth and all we had was a gravitational force. Nothing has any weight to it. So it doesn't matter whether it's something massive like the CN Tower or this ring on my hand or me or anything else. Everything in a vacuum, not in an atmosphere, would tend towards the Earth at the exact same rate, which is, what is it? I think 9.8 meters per second. Universal rate of free fall. Yeah, 9.7 to 9.8 meters per second. Okay, so in their theory, because there's let's just say there's it's just an abstraction again. There's a vacuum around the Earth. There's no atmosphere because there's no other force acting on the object because it's in pure empty outer space. There's no force acting upon these objects giving it weight other than gravity. Gravity would affect all those objects in the exact same way. So this whether we dropped a bowling ball or a feather, which I'm going to show you with the fake demonstration of Brian Cox, a bowling ball, a feather, the CN Tower, me, my ring, it doesn't matter. In a vacuum near the Earth, they would all fall to the Earth at the exact same rate, which is 9.8 meters per second. That is their theory. They need this for their model. There has to be this inherent attractive force upon the Earth. And we're going to show that every experiment, every demonstration ever done to prove this supposed universal rate of free fall, which proves gravity, the gravitational attraction, it's a hoax. They lie. These are all made up, fraudulent videos that they show supposedly proving this stuff. And it's this idea of a universal rate of free fall is mythological, and it's been mythological from the beginning. Okay, so this universal rate of free fall. Traditionally, the story that we're told in academia, by the way, sorry for the dog barking, but can't really help that. It's not mine. But anyways, the story we're given regarding this universal rate of free fall is, so apparently this experiment was done by Galileo. So just one more time. I know sometimes people might feel like I'm being repetitive, but I really want to make it clear. So two objects in space, doesn't matter how big they are, CN Tower or the ring on my hand, no difference. If they're in a vacuum and they approach the Earth or any other object with gravitational mass, they will be sucked towards it at the exact same rate, 9.8 meters per second, because the downward trajectory is, it's not being caused by the object. It's being caused by the Earth or the thing with gravitational mass. And there's no reason why the Earth or any other planet, quote unquote, would affect the CN would affect the CN tower differently from the ring on my hand. So it sucks them all at the same rate. So apparently Galileo supposedly proved this in his experiment on the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So he stood and dropped two different items. So this is the old view, which is what I subscribe to, the non-metaphysical view of reality, is that if we drop items of different masses, so this lighter item here and this heavier item here, the heavier item, let me just make sure I'm recording. Yep, okay, I'm good. This heavier item here is going to fall faster than the lighter one. So heavier items fall faster than lighter ones. This is just reality. If you believe empirical reality, you understand this point. If you believe in metaphysics, however, which supposedly Galileo proved, you believe in theology like space and gravity, when you drop items of two different masses, two different weights, or not weight because it's weightless in space, but you drop items of two different masses down, they're going to fall at the exact same rate, the universal rate of free fall, which is 9.8 meters per second, 9.8 meters per second squared. So apparently Galileo proved this, and this experiment that he supposedly has done, I mean, this has been so bad. This is just a myth. It's still told to children in school that Galileo proved gravity. It's been so badly discredited, not just by flat earthers and people like me who don't know quote unquote anything. Even secular academics in the university system have thoroughly discredited this for multiple reasons, and we're going to go over the documentation on that. So let's see. News pantheism. Let's see. So page 309 of the manifesto. 309. Tower experiment myth. So yeah, just to show you that I'm not misrepresenting their doctrine, this is taken, oh, my mistake. This is taken directly from NASA's website. Don't tell me I lost the page. Yeah, we're good. So this is taken directly from NASA's website, a citation from the most authoritative of sources regarding space and physics in outer space. The acceleration of the object equals the gravitational acceleration. The mass, size, and shape of the object are not a factor in describing the motion of the object. So all objects, regardless of size, shape, or weight, free fall with the same acceleration. So the CN tower and my ring fall the exact same rate in the vacuum of space when confronted with some planet which is letting out gravity or causing a gravitational force. So I did not misrepresent their doctrine at all. This is what they teach. Let's go through the citations proving Galileo's tower experiment is a load of rubbish. Okay. Yeah, we'll skip over this point. This is coming from Ernst A. Moody, professor of philosophy at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, and Columbia University, department chair and president of the American Philosophical Association. So this is an accredited academic, says the following in his book, maybe a book or a collection of works, whatever it is, but Studies in Medieval Philosophy, Science, and Logic, collected papers. So this is in the section called The Dynamics of the Leaning Tower Experiment, page 203 to 204. Okay. That the famous Leaning Tower Experiment, thus interpreted as a sheer myth, has been pointed out by numerous scholars who, like Galileo himself, thought that school traditions ought to be tested by first-hand study of the evidence. It is questionable whether the experiment was ever performed, but it did take place, we may be assured, on the incontestable authority of Galileo himself, that its physical meaning was totally different from that which is ascribed to it by the traditions of our physics books. So, see right here, and here he explains how this experiment, supposedly being done, it entered physics into a new era, and he's admitting that it's a myth, that multiple scholars, they testify to that fact. We read as well in Engines of Our Ingenuity, written by John H. Leonhard, professor of mechanical engineering and history at the University of Houston. There was no tradition of describing experimental research in Galileo's day. Controlled experiments were almost unknown, so Galileo's report was pretty skimpy. He seems to have dropped different balls from a tower, but what weights, what towers? We can be pretty sure it was the Leaning Tower of Pisa, but we end up doubting whether or not he really did the experiment. Maybe he just reported what he thought should have happened. So, more abstractions and thought experiments. Even Wikipedia admits this as well. So if you go into their section, Galileo's Leaning Tower Pisa experiment, it says the following. According to the story, Galileo discovered through this experiment that the objects fell with the same acceleration, proving his prediction true, while at the same time disproving Aristotle's theory of gravity, which states that all objects fall at the speed proportional to their mass. Most historians consider it to have been a thought experiment rather than a physical test. So there we go. It never happened. And we're going to look into, let's see. Okay, so here we see this is important as well regarding the experiments of Giovanni Riccioli. So I'll just read this portion from my book. Okay. So it has already been well established in the preceding that a vacuum is a meaningless, impossible concept with the refutations of Aristotle, Zeno of Elea. But even still, the tower story of Galileo is discredited further by the experiments of Giovanni Riccioli, another famed and award-winning Italian astronomer, who proved that bodies most certainly do not fall at the same rate, irrespective of weight, size, or material. So if you read what Wikipedia says about Riccioli's experiment, so this guy proved that things fall differently. There is no universal rate of free fall. This is what they have to say about him. His results show that while falling bodies generally showed constant acceleration, there were differences determined by weight and size and density. Riccioli said that if two objects of different weights are dropped simultaneously from the same height, the heavier one descends more quickly so long as it is of equal or greater density. If both objects are of equal weight, the denser one descends more quickly, obviously. For example, in dropping balls of wood and lead that both weigh 2.5 ounces, Riccioli found that upon the leaden ball having traversed 280 Roman feet, the wooden ball had traversed only 240 feet. A table in the New Almagest contains data on the 21 such paired drops. So Wikipedia is saying this. So Riccioli's experiments prove that items of different mass and weight fall at different speeds. So this is how they deal with this problem of the fact that items fall at different weights. So we read in the Proceedings of the American Philosophical Society, Dr. Alexander Coiré, who is professor in philosophy of science and religion at EPHE, so Paris University, France, Proceedings, and this is volume 7, number 2, page 231. This is how they deal with it. They say, the results of the experiments, which Riccioli repeated 15 times, are indubitable. Heavy bodies fall quicker than light ones, yet they're lagging behind, which, depending on the weight and the dimension of the balls, varies from 12 to 40 feet, does not contradict the theory developed by Galileo. It is to be explained by the resistance of air and has been foreseen by him. On the other hand, the observed facts are perfectly incompatible with the teachings of Aristotle. So, he's saying that it's the resistance of air that's causing these items to fall at different speeds when they're dropped from the same height. But so basically he's saying this experiment was not performed in a vacuum, what Riccioli did, so it doesn't qualify. But here's the problem. Let's go up again. Was Galileo's experiment that supposedly proved the universal rate of free fall, was that performed in a vacuum? Is the Leaning Tower of Pisa in Italy, is that the only place in the world that has a vacuum surrounding it? No, it wasn't proven. There's no vacuum around it, obviously. So, I mean, if you're going to discredit Riccioli because he didn't perform his experiments in a vacuum, which disproved Galileo's universal rate of freefall, what about Galileo himself, who performed it on top of this tower in the open air with no vacuum around him? Just nonsense. It's just contradiction and special pleading fallacy that, our experiments, when not performed in a vacuum, that prove more sensible physics relating to flat Earth, that this is not allowed because it's not done in a vacuum, but then Galileo's experiments are permitted, even though that also wasn't done in a vacuum. So, just more contradictions on their end. And now we're going to, I believe, get into the more conspiratorial side of things, showing how in recent times there have been some dubious, fake, falsified demonstrations supposedly proving the universal rate of free fall to be true. So let's go to, all their attempts to prove this has been fake. I think it was, what's his name? Brian Cox vacuum experiment. Okay. So this is the video that these globe earthers will point to. They'll say, oh, this proves that a universal rate of free fall exists, that the force of gravity exists, that things fall because the earth is attracting them downwards or towards its center. This video is a lie. It's a fraud. And Brian Cox is an agent of the deep state, and he's trying to promote this scientism propaganda right now. So this was released in, 9 years ago in the show called Human Universe on BBC. And I mean, it's 2023, okay? If you trust anything that comes out of the BBC or any mainstream television in general, then you're just woefully ignorant. I don't trust anything that comes out of these, and this is another example of why. Let's go through this. So, skip a bit. So right now they're going to drop a bowling ball and a feather. So we see the bowling ball and the feather, and in an atmosphere, they're going to show that they obviously fall at different speeds. The heavier object falls faster than the lighter one. Okay, so the bowling ball falls faster than the feathers.
Now in this case, they're...
So skip. So now they're quote-unquote sucking out the oxygen from this chamber, so it's a vacuum. So we're going to see Galileo's little universal rate of free fall in action, gravity in action. So in a vacuum... Oh, what do you know? Look at that. What a great miracle of science. The bowling ball and the feather fall at the exact same rate. So, what is the problem with this video? Firstly, okay, let's go to the beginning. Firstly, they never show you an unedited clip of this. They're just showing you this ridiculous slow motion. They never show you like it in real time. But I digress. It's unnecessarily cropped, and this is a Frankenstein monster of a video. But let's look at this.
Release.
So, in the beginning, you'll notice there's clearly one bowling ball and one feather here. So this is the first scene we're shown. And if you let it continue, let it continue, let it continue. That one feather, look at that. It suddenly changes into like 4 or 5, 6 feathers. Keep going. I mean, this is obviously a fake video, CGI. They add this curious inquiry type of music. It's such cringe. Just like, wow, that's pretty interesting. Let's think about that deeper. Wow, look at that. Okay, so that, remember, one feather in the beginning turns into 4, 5 feathers. Slam, and they fall at the exact same rate. So this is showing clear signs of unnecessary editing. This is not one continuous clip here. This is a Frankenstein hodgepodge of multiple clips. And why do they have to do that? If this was really real and they did this in a vacuum chamber and they fell at the exact same rate, literally just record the thing dropping and show it to us. Why do you need to cut and crop multiple videos together? That is extremely suspect. Next problem with this video is, if you look,
Count 2, 1, release.
Take a look closely. When they release the feather, you're going to notice something quite peculiar. Did you catch it?
Release.
Do it again. So when he drops the feather, when they drop the feather, you're going to see the fringes of the feather go upward. They're going to like float upwards. So, see that? It's going upwards. The fringes are moving upwards. This is supposed to be a vacuum, right? This has to be a vacuum. That's the only thing that's supposedly making the bowling ball and feather fall at the exact same rate and the exact same speed, 9.8 meters per second squared. I mean, if this is a vacuum, there should be nothing causing the fringes of the feather to float upwards. If there's an atmosphere, if there's air around, then the air would be hitting up against the fringes of the feather, causing it to float up. There's a contradiction in terms here. On the one hand, this is a complete vacuum, which is allowing things to fall at the same rate, but on the other hand, there's clearly air particles around, which is causing the fringes to float upwards, because the fringes are colliding against those air particles. So there's a contradiction. They're showing two different physics here. The way the feather is moving is showing me clearly that this is not a vacuum, and the way they're falling at the same time is showing me that there is a vacuum. So this is likely just a regular video taken of both the bowling ball and the feather just compiled together and not done in any vacuum and just slowed down a little bit through some editing. So that's the second problem. We see the feathers float up, and we're going to see that more dramatically in the second video that they show. Boom.
They came down.
And then, wow, look at that.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Look at that. They came down exactly the same.
Comes out exactly at the same time. Oh, look at the acting. Look at this guy. How much did they pay him to make that face on camera? Oh, goodness gracious.
Brilliant.
Okay. Done.
The happy feather fall together is because they're not falling. They're standing still. There is no force acting on them.
Okay, here's his metaphysics. Okay, look at this. So, now check this out. I need to show you it in my book. So when they show this clip at the end, this is supposed to be a replay of what they previously showed us, right?
Still, there is no force acting on them at all.
So this is supposed to be a replay of what we just saw before, just in regular time. Again, it's still chopped up and cropped up because they have this angle, then they have this angle. I mean, okay, you're going to see that this supposed replay, it's not the same video that we were shown before. Again, more chopping and editing. So, if you look, this is what, let me see. Okay, so this is what we saw in the first video, the slow-mo version of things falling down. Of the bowling ball and the feather, excuse me. So, let's go back.
Release.
Okay, this is what we saw first. Right? This is what we see in the ending video, which is supposed to be a replay in quote-unquote real time. Okay.
There is no force acting on them at all.
Okay, so that's the replay. Now, I took a screenshot of both of those and put them side by side in the book. These are two different videos. This is the first one we showed, the slow-mo. This is the second one. This is not the same video, and again, you'll notice the same problem in the second one they show.
There is no
Of the feather, the fringes, they move upwards dramatically, which wouldn't happen in a vacuum because there's no air particles to collide against. Look at that dramatic movement. And it's two different videos. This is clearly, again, a science project, and not a real science, let's say an art project of cutting. Why do they need to do this? All you would need to do, if there was a vacuum chamber right in front of me right now, I just need to put the bowling balls and the feather on top and then let them go and then record the fall all the way down. Why do I need to record this close-up shot, then the far shot, and then have one scene with one feather and another scene with multiple feathers and then combine them together, and then two different scenes being shown at the beginning and the end? They doctored this one. They just edited it as much as they could to try to make it seem believable and dramatic. And if you notice, the problem that was in the first one of there being one feather in the beginning and multiple feathers in the second clip that they show you, it's there as well. Look.
They're standing still. There is no force acting on them at all.
Okay, so again, clearly one feather. I don't even know what this feather is hooked up to, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. One feather. Look at that. Multiple feathers.
He reasoned that if you couldn't see the background, there'd be no way.
Now, why would they need to do this? If a universal rate of free fall really exists, why would the BBC need to go out of their way to produce this clearly faked and unnecessarily edited video to supposedly prove its existence, which has multiple scores of problems within it. This, to me, the fact that they have to fake it to prove it, quote unquote, I mean, this demonstrates for me clearly that the universal rate of free fall doesn't exist. If it existed, they wouldn't need to do all this stuff. So that deals with the universal rate of free fall sufficiently. And actually, let's go to page 321. There's one more thing I want to say about this. Or actually, even better, I'll show you the video. Leaning Tower Experiment, Galileo. Okay. And supposedly they proved this point yet again of a universal rate of free fall of the force of gravity with David Scott on Apollo 15 performing the experiment. Let's watch this one.
Well, in my left hand I have a feather. In my right hand a hammer. And I guess one of the reasons we got here today was because of a gentleman named Galileo a long time ago who made a rather significant discovery about falling objects in gravity fields. And we thought that where would be a better place to confirm his findings than on the moon. And so we thought we'd try it here for you. The feather happens to be appropriately a falcon feather for our falcon. And I'll drop the two of them here and hopefully they'll hit the ground at the same time. How about that?
Oh, wow, amazing. They fell at the exact same time. Okay. There's no method. I mean, we already know the moon landing is a hoax. We saw the BBC, they faked this footage, and now they're doing it in their fake moon landing. Okay, this doesn't exist, this tower experiment and all the myths surrounding it. There's no universal rate of free fall. If you notice, the feather and the hammer supposedly fall at the exact same time, but the astronaut himself, when they're in Apollo 15, they're bouncing around on the moon. They don't fall at the exact same rate as the hammer and the feather that fell down. So it's just riddled with contradictions. This, to me, throws out the idea of a universal rate of free fall. It doesn't exist because of all these fake hoaxes and attempts to prove its existence. Okay, let's go. Next, we get into Einstein's time dilation. So, time dilation, let's see. Go to my notes. 10, page 359. So, time dilation is central to the theory of relativity. It essentially teaches that both space and time are relative. So, according to the Einsteinian theory, when an object is moving, it experiences time slower than when an object is traveling, or when an object is standing still. Let me just prove this to you. Okay, let's just see a video on time dilation. And Einstein's theory of relativity is complete, insane, contradictory nonsense. It's nothing but gibberish, gobbledygook philosophy. That's it. And I mean, it double speaks at every single turn that it makes. Literally, it would make more sense than Einstein's supposed theory of relativity, this miracle of science, this great intellectual leap. I mean, it would make more, if you actually analyze the logic behind it, it would make more sense doing this than explaining the theory of relativity. If we were to just sit here and run our lips together, it would make more logical, coherent sense than what is taught in the theory of relativity, which is an absolute mind meltdown. Try to find a short video. Okay, I will skip to the necessary parts.
One evening in the spring of the trudging of the United on time.
Yeah, how Einstein supposedly came up with this again was just another thought experiment. He just
clerk and burned.
just sitting
After
there,
trudging through his day's work, decided to board a
mentally
tram car as soon as
masturbating,
possible,
pontificating the
truths
universe.
of the
It's
universe
not
in his
science.
free time.
Yeah, you hear that?
His
You hear
work
that?
as soon as possible to contemplate the truths.
He would leave work as soon as possible to contemplate the universe on his free time.
Einstein would
This
often wrap up
philosophy,
his work as soon as possible to contemplate the truths of the universe in his free time.
just mentally masturbating.
It was one of these thought experiments he devised. The tram car were receding at the speed of
here's the
modern
main point.
physics forever. While receding away from the Zeitglocke clock tower, Einstein imagined what would happen if the tramcar were receding at the speed of light. He realized that if he were to travel at 186,000 miles per second, the clock's hands would appear to completely freeze. At the same time, Einstein knew that, back at the clock tower, the hands would tick along at their normal pace. For Einstein, time had slowed down. This thought blew his mind.
Oh, I'm
Einstein
sure it
concluded
did.
that the faster you move through space, the slower you move through time.
So there you go, straight from science ABC. Okay, the faster you move through space, the slower time is. So time slows down. So to give an example, let's say you and I were beside each other. You're standing still, and I'm in a rocket ship, and let me even make it simpler. Let's say you have two twins. Okay, one is named Jack, one is named Jones, and Jones is standing still, and Jack jumps in a space. They're both born at the exact same time, and Jack jumps in a spaceship and he travels around at the speed of light. Whenever he's done that journey, let's say he travels for 50 years and comes, I don't know the exact calculation, but time slows down for people who are traveling. He travels around for 50 years. Let's say Jones and Jack were 20. Okay? He travels around for 50 years and then he comes back to his brother, Jones, who's just standing still. Or who was the one standing still? Let's just say, yeah, Jones was the one standing still. Jack travels. Jack is traveling for 50 years. He comes back to his brother Jones, who was just standing still. They were 20 years old before the journey started, so Jones would be 70 years old now. He aged 50 years in 50 years. But Jack, who jumped into the spaceship, he actually aged less than 50 years in that 50 years. Time slowed down for him. So time slows down for moving objects. And they're always going to do this obscurantistic fallacy, these relativist insane lunatics. They're going to put this fallacy out there, be like, oh, Waleed, but at the rates and speeds that we move on the earth in our regular day-to-day life, it's not enough to truly affect relativity. It's not enough to truly feel any difference in our aging or time to slow down. You have to travel at the speed of light in order to really feel its significant effects of time dilation. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. In your theory, no matter how, that's just pushing, that's unfalsifiable. If you say, oh, but you traveling in your car is just, you're going to experience this tiny, 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 tiny bit of time dilation, not enough for you to actually really measure, that's just unfalsifiability. In your theory, when people are moving, depending on the speed they're moving, that time slows down for them. If they're moving at regular speeds on the earth, just walking around, it's a little bit of time dilation. If they're traveling at the speed of light, it's a lot of time dilation. Time slows down for moving objects. Now, here's the problem with this relativistic theory of time. Time is relative depending on your perspective and how you're moving. Here's the issues with it. So let's go to... So I'm going to be... These arguments I'm getting are largely from a guy. His name is Professor Herbert Dingle from 1890 to 1978. And he was, including many things, he was the president of the Royal Astronomical Society, professor of natural philosophy at Imperial College, professor of history and philosophy of science at University College, and as well he was part of the British government eclipse expeditions of 1927 and 1932. So this guy here, Herbert Dingle, let's try to find a photo of him. Okay, so this guy, he presented to, he didn't believe the theory of relativity. He openly called it out for the nonsense that it was, and even though it's lauded as this great scientific advancement. This guy right here, okay, he proposed to his scientific colleagues, so-called scientific colleagues, what he calls in his book, which is titled Science at the Crossroads, he calls this thing the question. This question completely debunks the theory of relativity and shows it for the nonsense, contradictory insanity that it is. And he tried for decades to find an answer to this question. Nobody was able to answer this. Nobody was. Instead, he got shaming tactics. He got removed from his position. He tried, honestly, just like, please, I don't understand this. Can somebody explain to me what's going on with this theory of relativity and time dilation? And the scandal that ensued in the academic institutions that he was in. And this is not just some random dude. This guy is highly decorated. The scandal that ensued, it happened for over a decade, and then it forced him finally to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to write a book on this issue because clearly there's something suspicious about this question. People don't want to answer it because they probably don't have an answer. And he posted all the names, all the identities of the people in this book who shamed him, who tried to take him out of his position, who tried to destroy his career and his reputation just for asking this one question about the theory of relativity. And he kind of went on the offense after 10 years of being lambasted by his peers unjustly. So the question is essentially as follows, and I'm not taking it exactly from his book, but I'm distilling it down and putting it in modern words. Okay, so there is no better explanation for the theory of special relativity than this. This explanation I have gotten from Professor Dingle and is consistent with everything that I have read from mainstream science. So the special relativity theory asserts that if you were to put two of the same clocks pointing at the exact same time beside one another, clock A and clock B, we will call them, both oriented at precisely midnight, and one of the clocks starts to move, the clock that is moving will have time slowed down for it. So if somebody takes clock B, right here, so they're both at midnight, takes clock B, throws it in the back of their spaceship and starts accelerating away from clock A, and then returns back to it, he will find that clock B is slightly behind clock A because time slowed down because it was in motion. That is the theory of relativity and time dilation summarized. So no exaggeration, nothing like that. The question which Herbert Dingle proposes is this. This is another fundamental axiom of the theory of relativity. All motion is relative. There is no objective frame of reference. We can't say if, let's say I'm running, right? Waleed is running. We can't say Waleed is running objectively speaking. We can only say Waleed is running or Waleed is moving relative to something else. So from our perspective, it seems like the sun is going around us, but from the sun's perspective, it seems like we're going around it. If you think of, let's say, somebody standing on the side of a road and another person driving by, right? The person who's driving by on the road, let's say he's on the freeway driving 100 miles per hour, the person who's standing on the road, you know, to the person in the car, it looks like the person standing on the road is zipping by him. He feels like he's still, whereas the person standing on the road, he feels like he's still, and the person driving in the car is zipping by. According to the theory of relativity, there is no preferred or objective frame of reference. There is no way to objectively say who's moving and who's not. From the perspective of the driver, he is still, and the person standing on the road is moving. And from the perspective of the person standing on the road, he is still, and the driver is moving. No preferred frame of reference. Motion is purely relative. We can only say that things are moving with respect to other things, not objectively. Just the subjective Satanism of this worldview is so obvious. There is essentially no objective truth anymore. It's just everything's relative. Location is relative, position is relative, speed is relative, time is relative. You on your own subjective basis determine the reality around you. You on your own subjective basis determine the time you experience and the movement and everything like that. It's satanic relativism. This is relativistic, satanic, do what thou wilt philosophy. You're the master. You're the god of your own world applied to physics. But I digress. But anyways, just getting back to the time dilation thing. So there is no preferred frame of reference. The question which Professor Herbert Dingle put forward to his colleagues and took so much flack for was, if there is no preferred frame of reference and we put clock B into a car and drive away with it, or the spaceship, and it flies at light speed. I mean, from clock B's perspective, it feels like it's still, and clock A moved away from it at the speed of light. But from clock A's perspective, which is not in the spaceship, it looks like it was still, or it feels like it was still, and clock B moved away at the speed of light. So if there is no objective frame of reference, if we can't tell who was really moving and who was not, whether it was clock A or clock B, how can we determine which clock experiences time dilation? Which clock will have its time slowed down or its aging slightly reduced because of its movement? We can't even determine which one objectively moved according to your theory, because all motion is relative. You would, in order for us to know that, yes, The clock B was the one that went in the spaceship and moved, and its time got slowed down. In order for us to know that, we would have to have an objective frame of reference to determine that clock B was moving and clock A was still. But that is abhorred in your model, which is purely relativistic. How do we know which clock will experience time dilation? That is the question which Herbert Dingle proposed, and there's no answer to this. There's no answer. If all motion is relative, then you can't know which clock or which person or which thing is going to experience any time dilation because it's all relative, right? The relativity doctrine, it precludes the ability to make any scientific statement whatsoever because everything is relative, everything is subjective. There's no objective truth in this worldview. And that's my next argument. That's the argument that I'm making against Einstein, which Herbert Dingle put up, or he brought forward, is time dilation is nonsense because it would essentially require, because remember, clock B feels like it's moving and clock A feels like, clock B feels like it's still when it's moving and clock A feels like it's still, right? Both clocks would have to be both faster and slower than each other. I mean, this is theological, like on the level of its contradiction. This is like Trinity level stuff. Like there's three gods, but there's one, but they're three distinct persons, but they're one being. A one divine essence shared between three distinct persons, and one died, but they're all one, and one is praying to the other. Jesus praying to God, but they're the same being. This is on that level of insanity, perhaps even worse than that. Nobody can call this science. This is purely mental masturbatory philosophy, and not even good philosophy at that. It's just contradictions. So let's see, where were we at? So that's the time dilation refuted. It would require both clocks to be faster and slower than each other. I skipped over this point, but honestly, I should have explained that beforehand. I should give you a general rundown of the difference between the Newtonian and the Einsteinian system, but you kind of already will have a little bit of an idea after the refutation I made of time dilation. But let's go to page 327 of my book. Excuse me. Okay, so in the Newtonian concept, space is fixed. So we have a diagram right here of the Newtonian concept of space and the Einsteinian concept of space. So in Newton's concept, remember, he believed that space was the omnipresence of God the Father. Okay, space is fixed and it is unhindered and unaffected by mass. Space is the same all the way through. Gravity in Newton's system is a force. It is a force which propagates, like this pulling kind of force, which propagates through God the Father, which is space, and space is fixed. And time is fixed as well. Time in Newton's system just gradually proceeds along like normal. Nothing affects time. In Einstein's mind-bending, mind-melting, just like, again, just his theory, his nonsense theory, is space is not fixed anymore like in Newton's worldview. Space is now influenced by mass. So you see this Earth, presumably, sitting in the grid of space, and it's influencing space. So space and time is now being bent and warped by movements and by mass. So in Newton's system, space and time are the backdrop. They're the stage on which the events of the universe happen. The stage is not affected by the things on the stage. It's just the background setting. Whereas in the Einsteinian system, space and time are relative. Time can slow down, time can get quicker depending on your movement, and space can change, and it can be morphed and bent, and this is how he explains gravity. Space is now not the stage anymore on which the drama of the world takes place, but it is an active participant in the world. It's affected by the things of the world. This is the main difference between the Einsteinian and Newtonian theories. And in Newton's worldview, space was a force. In Einstein's worldview, space is not a force. It's not anything acting on something else primarily. It's really a line of precession, a line of movement. So the reason things are tending towards the center of this globe, quote unquote, is because the globe, the mass of the Earth, is bending space, and it's changing the Euclidean lines of space into non-Euclidean space. And it's changing the nature of the medium around you, and it's creating this line which tends towards the center of the earth. So here we have a pulling force. Here we have a line of precession, a line of movement being made. Space is being bent by mass. That's the difference between their theories, and also fixed time and relative time. So we've already refuted the Newtonian system. I've shown you how it's... Newton had no idea what space and gravity was. It was just metaphysics to him. If you want to believe that, that's fine. Go ahead. But you don't believe in empirical, demonstrable science. You believe in philosophy and metaphysics and Christian theology and Neoplatonism. So that's Newton's system done. Now let's go into Einstein's system. We already dealt with time dilation. It would require two clocks to be faster and slower than each other. Let's go into his general relativity. Okay. Arguments and summary. We left off Einstein's time dilation requires two clocks due to this doctrine of relative frames of reference. Okay, yeah, another point. On this doctrine of so point number 11 against gravity is on this doctrine of relative frames of reference. They can't even prove heliocentrism. So modern science has adopted. They've gone with the Einsteinian theory. Okay, and they'll inconsistently jump back and forth between Einstein and Newton. They can't. They have to pick one because they held contradictory views of space and time. Newton had space and time fixed. Einstein had space and time relative. And then these guys will be like, oh, whichever one works for experimentation. Just because something works for experimentation doesn't mean it's true. You need to explain yourself. Which one is the truth? Is space and time fixed or is it relative? If you believe it's fixed, you go into Newton. If you believe it's relative, you go into Einstein. You can't jump between the two. You don't have a consistent theory at that point. But this, generally speaking, the modern establishment, they will side with Einstein on this one. They'll favor and lean towards him until they find contradictions there, then they'll run back to Newton. But in this favored Einsteinian theory, this doctrine of relative frames of reference, relative motion, there's no way to determine if I'm driving past you on the freeway and you're standing on the road, whether Walid is actually still and you're moving or whether you're still and Walid is moving. There's no way to determine which one is actually objectively moving. According to this supposition, your metaphysics, you can't even prove heliocentrism. You can't. So what is heliocentrism? Heliocentrism is the theory that the sun is the center of the solar system and that the planets, including the Earth, they all orbit around it, right? But here's the thing. Are you saying objectively? I mean, they will. They'll say it's 100% proven. It's not geocentrism. 100% proven that the Earth orbits around the sun. The sun is the center of the solar system. But wait. According to our perspective, according to our frame of reference, it feels like we're still and the sun is going around us. But according to the sun's perspective, it seems like it's still and everything's moving around it. When you say that heliocentrism is objectively true, you are profaning your Einsteinian metaphysic because you are positing an objective frame of reference. You're saying objectively the sun is still and objectively the earth is moving. So, and according to their theory, they can't even prove heliocentrism because their theory is so ridiculous, this Einsteinian relativity, it precludes the ability to make any knowledge statement whatsoever, whether it's geocentrism is true or heliocentrism is true. You can't make any knowledge statement because everything is relative. So, according to your theory, just as you say that we're going around the sun, I could just say the sun is going around us. Flat Earth confirmed. You can't even prove heliocentrism in relativity. So their own theory, the burden of this relativity is so heavy it collapses their own model that they've been trying to build for centuries now. Yeah, they can't even prove heliocentrism without contradicting relativity, and without relativity, they have no theory of gravity. So this is the modern theory of gravity, relativity, right? But relativity can't be mixed with heliocentrism because you can't say it, that objectively things go around the sun. No. So your main theory of gravity today cannot be mixed with heliocentrism. That's a big problem. You got to pick one. Heliocentrism and relativity, two indispensable dogmas of modern cosmology, cannot be mixed together. Point number 12 is the cartoons that they use to explain general relativity, which is the current standing theory of gravity that the scientific establishment has adopted, contradicts its own principles. So we're going to go to page 355 through 357 of the manifesto. E55. Let's go. Okay. So, yeah, we'll start here first. So, you see, and this is, it's just laughable. Look at this. This is supposed to be a real image of outer space. What is this? What do they claim this thing is? In this new image from NASA's Galaxy Evolution Explorer. So, if you notice here, in these images, supposedly this really is just painting, cartoon, but in these images, there is an objective sense of direction. In relativity, remember, there is no objective sense of direction. There is no up or down. It's all relative, right? My up is relative to, let's say, because I'm in North America, right? My up is away from North America, whereas let's say, my up is this direction away from North America, whereas somebody on the south, in Australia, on the bottom of the globe, his up is away from Australia. All right, so his up is my down is his up. There is no objective sense of direction, but in these supposed images they show us of the universe, there is an objective concept of up and down. So you have this disk here, which is a flat plane. Keep in mind, it's a flat plane, and up is this way, down is this way, left is this way, right is this way. There is an objective concept of up and down. This is not a relativistic scheme they're showing me here. So, I mean, the reason they do this, they have to, and this is on NASA's official website, I have it screenshotted right here, and you can go on their website to check it out. The reason they have to do this is because true relativity, truly making all directions relative, is so unfathomable. It's so nonsensical. There's no way anybody can understand it or even draw a diagram of a world that is purely directionless. Everything that you draw, every image that you make, it has an objective sense of up and down, because we just have to assume that. You know what I mean? Objective directions are just a natural assumption that human beings make to operate in the world around them. When you get rid of that, you enter into pure lip flapping insanity. So that's why they have to do that when they're making their images, because every image, an image is a thing containing spatial concept. Anything containing spatial concept has to have an objective sense of directions, and they need to do this even for their galaxy photos as well. And they do that even with their so-called explanations of general relativity, which I'll show you. So this is not relativistic. This has an objective concept of up and down. And if you look in their theory of relativity, so there is, again, this is what they use to explain the concept of mass bending space. So it's like this fabric, this web, which space is like a web or fabric, and the Earth is like this globe. It's this ball that sits in there, and it causes a depression in it, almost like a fabric or bed sheet being bent by something on top of it. And let me actually pull up, there's a video on YouTube, which they try to explain relativity in these terms. What was it called? It was like relativity, gravity explained, demonstrated, something like that. There you go, gravity visualized. It says 138 million views.
Relativity, the explanation for gravity is that matter bends space.
So what you're seeing here in this video is essentially just a real life, he's got this bed sheet or whatever spread over this frame, and you're seeing kind of a real life rendition of this concept right here. So that sheet is these lines of space.
Mass in a place in space.
This is how they try to give their theory of relativity some kind of empirical basis, because right now all this is just stories. It's just abstractions and drawings and metaphysics. This is, with this experiment, quote unquote, they try to give it some kind of an empirical real life basis. But I'll show you the flaw inherent within it.
Space-time, and so this is a sheet of Lycra. Where do you get this?
Lycra.
My old bike shorts. No, there's literally a spandex.com. You can get a sheet like this if you buy the sale stuff. So depending on the time.
Okay.
And so you put matter, and it warps space-time. And so if I have another object, it also warps space-time. They feel that, and they're attracted to each other. And so that's...
So this was the objection I made before when I was talking about the solar system. So it's arbitrary in their worldview how Jupiter can be a point of attraction here and Saturn here. Why don't they all just meet together right in the middle in the exact same way? If you're going to use this diagram to explain relativity, I mean, look, you have 2 points of matter that is distorting space-time. Look, they just meet together. The same thing should happen in our solar system and everything in the universe. It should just squish together. The fact that you have multiple points that attract and really don't affect each other is arbitrary, but that's not the main point I'm making.
They're attracted to each other. And so that's Einstein's picture of gravity. Objects warp space-time, feel that curvature, and move.
You're right there on that.
In space-time more. And so if you have objects there, they are going to respond to that, right? That big mass would feel the warping of space-time by the marble too, right? It would move a little bit, but we usually ignore that. The Earth makes the sun move a little bit, but it's so small you can ignore it. The moon makes the Earth kind of wobble around a point 3/4 of the way from the center of the Earth. We usually don't account for that when we're looking at satellite motion. Well, instead of just letting go of one, what if I give it a sideways push? Now it orbits. Now it's
So this is how they explain the orbiting planets orbiting around the sun, things going around. It's due to the bending of space-time.
Not noticeably, there's some perturbations from other planets and things, but this one does lose energy and spirals in. If I don't push it as hard, it will do an ellipse for a while anyway. And the things I thought of to do with why is everything going in the same direction? Well, the answer is it wasn't. Different directions. But there was a preferred direction.
So this is essentially how our cosmos works in their worldview.
And things going the opposite way got eliminated, and when it's all said and done, everything's going the same way.
Let's see this.
You want to give them so they spread out a little when you throw it. The ones going the other way, and so that them. And so they've seen all this on
Let's see, there's another point where so this is how he shows, okay, so let's say this is the sun, he's going to show the Earth orbiting around it. So that right there is the sun, the Earth orbiting around it, and then the moon orbiting around the Earth as it's orbiting around the sun.
And space-time too, right? And so maybe, you can get one thing to orbit another. There we go. So the Earth-Moon system, maybe?
Okay, so again, now you get a general idea of this concept of general relativity. This is just a physical demonstration of this drawing here. Now, here's a problem. Again, relativity explicitly states there is no objective frame of reference. There is no objective sense of direction. Okay, this grid right here, or this sheet of lycra, or whatever material he's using, that is an objective sense of direction. Up is away from the sheet. Up is away from the sheet. Down is towards the sheet. And then left and right are lateral across the sheet. There is an objective sense of... This is a flat universe he's making. There's an objective sense of direction. Objective up and down here. And right now, the Earth mass is sitting in this ball... This depression of space. It's moving down into it. Okay, so if this was really truly relativistic, like if we went fully consistent with it, because right now this is not relativistic, this is objective right here. You would have like a depression right here, a depression right here, a depression right here, a depression here. It would be depressions everywhere because there's no objective sense of up and down. Here, are you seeing the objective sense of directions? Because I am. There's up, which is away from this Euclidean, turning into non-Euclidean, this grid of space. Down is into the grid of space, and then left and right are along this grid of space. So this is not relativistic like you guys need it. What they do is they draw this thing out to kind of explain relativity and how gravity works. And yeah, to the simple-minded, maybe the not so critically thinking, it makes sense. But when you think about it logically, it's not what they require, because again, you have up and down, left and right across this grid. and you couldn't draw it. If you really tried to draw a purely relativistic model of the universe, or model anything purely relativistic, you would have a depression here, a depression here, a depression here. There'd be grids going sideways and upway, all the way down, all kinds of crazy directions. You would never be able to draw it, because pure relativity, anything, it makes so little sense. It is so nonsensical. You can't even diagram it properly. Everything you draw, everything you put together has an objective sense of up and down, including this thing. So this is not what they need for relativity. So that's my first points against Jack. And if this relativity is refuted, that's their modern theory of gravity out the window. It's all based on this. And I'm showing how it contradicts their core principles. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, they assume a flat plane interface. This is a flat plane, which is being bent. A flat plane interface with an objective concept of up and down to explain their theory, which is a contradiction to the entire foundation of their physics that posits there is no preferred direction in space. This is supposed to represent space. This is a preferred direction of space. The preferred direction is along these lines of space. Okay, another point is, number 13 is, this ball which is sitting in that grid, it would require some force to depress that grid downwards. What is the nature of that force? What is that? Nobody knows. If gravity is not a force, gravity is this bent space-time. It's creating a new path of movement. It isn't the force itself. These bent areas are gravity. What is causing that Earth to sit in that grid and push it down and cause that depression? Gravity? So what is gravity causing gravity? This bent line is gravity right here. What is causing that Earth to sit there and make those depressed, kind of this cone shape that you're seeing here? No explanation. They have no idea. Again, I don't really think they thought through. They didn't think of that. They didn't think that far into it. And lastly, point number 14 is, even if we allow them to use this as an explanation for relativity, and it's not a proper explanation because this isn't relativistic, it's objective, even if we allow them to use this, it still does not give them what they need. So they need things to attract to the center of the Earth. Right now, what's being made here with this depression in space-time is things are not being attracted to the center of the Earth. They're being attracted to the bottom. So if we're going to accept this as an accurate representation of relativity, which they always use to teach it, everything would not be going towards the core of the Earth, but rather it would be tending downwards to Australia. We over here in North America, or wherever else, we would feel this constant push towards Australia, because the same thing happens in this demonstration. Look, when he makes these things orbit that mass, which we'll call the Earth, in the center of the sheet of Lycra, they're not swirling around perpetually. They're trying to make their way towards the center and the bottom. I mean,
rolls and you have to sew it together. I've been told to use.
So there's it's not just centerward; it's a downward depression and tendency, and they can't have that for their model, because then where is this force that's pushing everything towards Australia? It doesn't exist. So this, for multiple reasons, is not a true demonstration of gravity and relativity. Even though it's just a drawing anyways, they failed at even that. So I think that should be it right there. The problem that this poses, so we just went through and refuted the Einsteinian and Newtonian theory. The problem that this poses for the globe earther is that he has to pick one. Either space and time are fixed or space and time are relative. If he says space and time are fixed, he chooses the Newtonian system. If he chooses the Newtonian system, I mean, that's not even science anymore. It's just metaphysics, theology, God the Father, space, and gravity, whether physical or metaphysical, corporeal or incorporeal. I left it to the consideration of my reader. Then, I mean, he can't call himself a scientist anymore. He's a theologian. So if he wants to do that, that's fine. But that is where the Newtonian system leads you. So if he wants to be a Newtonian, then he is a occult, alchemical, Neoplatonic metaphysician. If he wants to go with the Einsteinian theory, then he enters into the abject, irrational, meltdown, mind melt, that is the theory of relativity. Time is relative, space is relative, up is down is up. Two clocks would have to be both faster and slower than each other. A theory which is so contradictory, it can't even be diagrammed properly, because when they diagram this concept right here of supposed relativity, they are accidentally, because they have to, because that's the only way the human mind can understand anything, they have to include an objective sense of up and down. Left and right are across along this grid right here, this grid of space, and up and down are perpendicular to this grid of space. And that's it right there. They only have two theories of gravity as far as I know. It's Newton and Einstein. Newton is occult metaphysics, and Einstein is irrational nonsense that can't even be explained properly in a drawing. And this is their theories of gravity. It's either Newton or Einstein. They don't have a proper explanation of gravity, therefore the Earth cannot be a globe. If gravity is dead, that means his globe is dead. Newtonian gravity is occult metaphysics, and Einsteinian gravity, general relativity, is abject irrational nonsense. His gravity is dead, that means his globe is dead. Without gravity, we can't be standing on the outside of a spinning ball. Flat Earth confirmed. So it's done. It's done by dismantling the glue which holds together their model, which is gravity. I have, in doing so, also dismantled the heliocentric and globe model as a whole. Only thing left is a flat and stationary Earth, and they have to even acknowledge that that makes sense, because their photos of galaxies are flat, their photos of space-time, it's a flat grid. You can only understand things based on a flat objective sense, a flat grid interface, and an objective sense of up and down. So gravity is done, so is the globe. I rest my case. If any of these guys try to come up to you and say that this stuff is science, and where these hocus pocus crazy religious people positing all of these metaphysical and supernatural explanations for things, I mean, clearly they have not understood their model. This is just ancient rehash metaphysics from the past, from antiquity. All that's been done to it is they have couched their metaphysics in more secular, impersonal sounding terminology. So in the past, it would have been personified: God, devil, angels. And I do believe in God, angels, devil, Satan. Some cultures might have believed in spirits and things like that. They personified the forces and causes of the universe, and I believe in a personified understanding, not necessarily spirits, but I believe in angels and God and the devil. And all the atheist has done is he's taken that same, but the metaphysical Neoplatonic version of it, and he's given it sort of abstract names: space, time, general relativity, gravity, time dilation, mass, all this stuff. It's the same supernatural metaphysical causes that have been posited from the past in antiquity by philosophers like Democritus and their atomistic theories. All they've done is they've just couched it in secular sounding terminology, not they have abstracted it instead of personifying it, but it is the same system fundamentally deep down. So anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's really all I got to say on the matter. I hope this talk was a blessing, and I hope this inspires you as well to go through my book. There's a lot of useful information in there, which I really believe will arm you with the knowledge you need to know to deal with people in these discussions on perhaps one of the most important issues in the modern world, which is the nature of the earth, because it exposes how this system is and how badly they've lied to you. And really it all is about God and the devil. Why would they lie to you about the nature of the earth? Why would they try so hard to make you think you're this dot floating in space and that the world is not like the way the Bible and the Quran teach? Because it's Satan who is really behind the people running this world, who is influencing the people running this world, and Satan wants you to forget about the Lord, and he'll do anything to make you forget about him, including promoting a false cosmology which makes you think he doesn't exist. So, like I said, I hope it was a blessing, and peace be upon you guys. Take care. Peace and blessings in the name of the Most High, viewer. My name is Walid Naim, and I am a zealous submitter to the one true God, the creator of all mankind. Do you notice something wrong with the world? Something strange? Despite us having a church, synagogue, and mosque in every neighborhood, how has this entire Western civilization fallen into abject atheism, nihilism, and savagery? Why does life just seem so dull, so meaningless, and so devoid of anything real in the Occidental world? Despite the ubiquitous presence of these religious institutions, why are our so-called Muslim sons in large numbers drinking, smoking, partying, and chasing after women, with no seeming desire to do anything more with their life other than satisfy their base pleasures, when God has commanded them to be clean, righteous, and responsible leaders of their community? And why are our hijabi so-called Muslim daughters walking around with tight jeans that reveal their figure, with TikTok accounts posting semi-provocative, self-absorbed videos of themselves online for the world to see, when God has commanded them to lengthen their garments and be modest in their mannerisms? What has happened here? These young men and women are supposed to be making themselves right before God while raising the next generation of ardent defenders of the holy faith. But it seems that Islam features no more in their lives other than a scarf on their head, a Friday fidgeting around in the mosque when their parents forced them to go against their will, or a decorative hanger in their car. At this rate, if God allows us to continue going down the road it is, then Islam and the Quran will become pretty much non-existent in the lives of most of our descendants, if it wasn't already non-existent now. If we do not take a stand soon, in a few generations our children's children will likely be indistinguishable from the secular West. Is that the kind of world we want to live in? Our kids to live in? A world practically devoid of the remembrance of the one God and all things sane? I obviously can't speak for you, but for my own self, I can personally say, count me out of it. I'm not going to sit here and just watch my brothers and sisters, those who claim to believe in God alone, believe in Judgment Day, His prophets and angels, and all the other aspects of this holy creed, get duped into going to hell. I'm not going to let this happen without at least something of an effort on my end to reroute this dark trajectory. So, again, how in the world do we end up here? There is a mosque in practically every neighborhood in the West, and no shortage of donations that get dropped in their boxes. They have had lots of funding, lots of time, and unquestioning support from their respective congregations, yet somehow have been run over by the secular atheist. All of their so-called Muslim children go to the atheist, secular public schools for most of their week to be taught beliefs that are completely incompatible with the Quran. And we wonder why they have ended up the way they are. If these houses, and by these houses I mean the mosques, were truly of God, that were doing everything right, then why would our Lord let them get so decisively trampled upon by their enemies? Why do the wicked have all of the reins of power here? Clearly, something is not adding up. Well, it is my thesis here today that the vast, vast majority of mosques that exist in this world today have lost their way and follow a religion which is completely foreign to the Quran. This is why they have failed so miserably in the West, and it seems that God has forgotten them. In truth, the real reason behind their shortcoming is that they, and many of us, have forgotten God Himself, which is why He has left us here collecting our bitter receipts. So, what are my exact criticisms of the mosques today? As a Muslim and a man committed to the truth above all else, what are my personal gripes with their institution, which claims to be for God? The first glaring problem I can think of is that the majority of people who call themselves Muslim have allied themselves with a body of literature that is foreign to the Word of God, treating it equal to, and in fact above, the Quran itself. Of course, I am talking about the Hadith. Listen, the facts are this. There is no justification within the Quran which tells us to follow this Hadith stuff, which came hundreds of years after the Prophet Muhammad died, and therefore he could have had no ability to oversee what people have said about him and determine if it is true or false. It is now becoming crystal clear, especially in the last 10 to 20 years, that many, many things that have been ascribed to him in their most quote-unquote authoritative texts, which they call their Sahih Hadiths, are forgeries that directly contradict God's final revelation. To take these words of men, i.e. the Hadith, and hold them to be equally authoritative to the words of God would be breaking the first and most important commandment, which is to worship God alone, making no equals with Him. To say that these supposed words of Muhammad, which are not even Muhammad's own words, but simply very doubtful rumors about what people who existed hundreds of years after him say he said, that have been decided upon by the scholars as authoritative, holds equal, or in fact any weight in our faith comparable to the verbatim words of God Himself, the Holy Quran, is idolatry. You are exalting man's words to the status of divinity, which should only be given to God's words. Nothing comes even close to the Quran, because God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, is its author. This includes the Hadith too, which pales in comparison and is superfluous to the glorious Quran. If you are interested in seeing a full refutation of the Hadith, you may watch my video titled A Defense of Prophet Muhammad, David Wood and Hadith Exposed, which is linked below. In it, along with refuting and putting in his place the worst opponent of Islam on the internet, Mr. David Wood, I also expose how the Hadith is completely contradictory to the Quran and the source of much of the Muslim world's problems. It is a 2-hour-long documentary where I seek to demonstrate the true character of Muhammad in the Quran, defending his history and personality with primary source quotations. I clear the last prophet of God's name from the people who have tarnished his reputation the most, which are certain types of Christians, and, sad to say, Hadith-following Muslims, which have said many terrible things about him. No, Muhammad was not a money-hungry, tyrannical warlord who married a 6-year-old girl. He was a shy, humble, meek man who married adult women, had compassion for even his worst enemies, and oftentimes had a tough time even standing up for himself out of fear of hurting other people's feelings. This is all demonstrated in detail in my video. Once again, the link for that will be in the description under the tab, The True Character of Muhammad in the Quran. So that is the first problem with the mosques, the reason for which I feel they have been forsaken by God, their adoption of an apostate literature which contradicts their foundational scripture. The second point of contention I have with many of the mosques is their seeming unwillingness to say anything controversial which may make them face persecution from their government. The fact that 9/11 was not only an inside job, but the fact that no planes hit the Twin Towers on that day, and the whole charade was a hoax designed by the governments of the world to forever frame the Muslim people as terrorists and justify invasions in our countries, should be taught to every man, woman, and child. This great fraud of the September attacks has left such a lasting, enduring reputation on every brown person, and Muslim in general, that it should be discussed in every mosque. Our people are not responsible for that crime, but it was the governments of the world who carried out that plot and framed us for it. 9/11 is just only one small example, though. There are many, many other quote-unquote conspiracy theories, which are really just conspiracy facts, avoided by the mosques due to their controversy, like the fact that the monetary system in the West is an ungodly scam based on usury, the fact that the so-called healthcare system is a predatory empire which doesn't try to cure anybody, but instead makes money off of human suffering, the fact that sodomite propaganda is being promoted to the masses, including our children, and the fact that the thing which I will call the C-19er, to avoid censorship, was a hoax perpetrated by the powers that be to greatly expand their police state, censorship incentives, and surveillance systems worldwide in order to create their new world order, and much more. These governments that have occupied our lands are de facto terrorist regimes, and the mosques seem to say nothing of it. They appear to be more concerned with not being labeled extremists while they live their comfortable, well-funded lives, avoiding topics that are hard to deal with due to the abject persecution they bring. That is my second problem with them. They're at the very least lack of awareness, or if not, perhaps lack of willingness to address the real geopolitical situation going on in the world. And lastly, my third trouble with the mainstream mosques, which can also be put into the category of conspiracy facts, is their complete ignorance on the true nature of the earth. It may sound as a shock to you, my viewer, that the Quran, the Bible, and in fact all of the ancient scriptures teach the earth is flat and stationary. This is the only model of the world which is compatible with those texts and also scientifically provable. This flat earth conspiracy, which should really be called the globe earth conspiracy, is one of the biggest lies of the modern world, we are told, and goes in line with what I said earlier about the endemic corruption of the governments of the world. Everything you have been told about where you live is a fabrication, and the space agencies are a shameless hoax. For a fully detailed presentation on the subject of flat earth, where I demonstrate the science, the history, the philosophy, the verses in the Bible and Quran proving it, and much more, you can read my book titled The Flat Earth Manifesto, which is linked in the description. This work runs to nearly 1,200 pages and is practically a textbook on not only the topic of flat earth, but the subject of physics proper, and I expose the biggest fraudulent religion of the West, which is science worship, otherwise known as scientism. As with all of my work, it too is available for free.
No, you do not live on a pathetic speck of dust spinning around in the middle of nowhere in space. You live in a brilliant, intelligently designed terrarium created by God and are at the center of the universe. Again, to learn more, the link to the Flat Earth Manifesto will be in the description. Those right there are my 3 biggest scores against the mosques of today. There are more points I could bring up, but these are the major ones. These are the controversies which have estranged me from the rest of the so-called Muslim world. Believe me when I say that I would love to join them, and that it hurts me so deeply that I have to pit myself up against the very institution I was born and raised in, the mosques I attended from childhood, whose carpets upon which I walked, stood, prayed, and listened to the preaching in my earliest years. But that is the price to pay for the truth. My commitment to God and what is right is more important than my emotional attachments to a place that was once dear to my heart. Simply put, this is why I think God has forsaken us. This is why I think that the mosques have been steamrolled by the secular atheist. It is because most of us have abandoned the word of God, neglected preaching the truth, and instead chosen comfort over courageous action. That is my thesis to why this great falling away in the West has taken place. If this sounds shocking to you, if it sounds so unbelievable that the majority of the so-called Muslim world could be deceived so badly, then I simply have these verses in the Quran to show you. In the name of God, the Almighty and the Merciful. Chapter 6, verse 116. And if thou obey most of those upon the earth, they will lead thee astray from the path of God. They follow only assumption, and they are only guessing. Chapter 25, verse 30. And the messenger will say, O my Lord, my people took this Quran as a thing abandoned. God has really predicted this a millennia ago. He knew that the people who follow what is really right are few and far between, that the majority of men and women are led astray, and the people who claim to love Muhammad the most, i.e. mainstream Muslims, would abandon the glorious Quran. God has revealed to us 1,000 years ago that this all would be the case. It is my mission, therefore, by the will of God, to band together with like-minded believers who have understood the truth and work together to build a new institution from the ground up, founded upon prudent fear. We need to start fresh, start anew. We need to build a new mosque where people can hear the unfiltered preaching from the Quran alone, where men and women can get married, where children can play and be educated in the truth, and where the name of the Most High God, without any associate partners, can be remembered. We need a group of highly dedicated men who will raise and defend this institution with their own hands if need be, and go out into the world warning people of the punishment of God, bearing witness to the truth of his oneness. That is my mission, my viewer. If you found that this mission of mine has touched your heart and is something you want to get involved with, then feel free to contact me in the email below. I am located in Ontario, Canada, and I'm looking forward to form a community with like-minded believers who want to contribute to this great cause. I am neither a nationalist nor racially biased. If you follow the Quran alone and believe in the truth, then as far as I'm concerned, you are my brother in the faith. I prefer you over someone of my own kindred who denies God and commits corruption in the earth. My loyalties are primarily ideological, not racial. Remember, my viewer, that this life is short. Everything we do and don't do is recorded by God and will either bear witness for us or against us on the day of judgment. Hell is eternal, and I do not know about you, but as for me, I want to meet my Creator in the best state possible. I want to spend my life struggling to build up my people, the true Muslims, so that God may be pleased with me on that day. If you are interested in that, then feel free to join me. If not, then find something else good to do which will prepare you for your appointment with the Most High. That is where we are all going anyway. With that being said, I say peace and God bless to all of you good people. Take care, everyone.